If you can convince me, why should I buy Eon's End?
Do you like cooperative games?
I do.
Okay. It's, do you like deck builders?
I'm not a huge fan, but I do like them. So I've got Dominion. I tell you what I love, Ascension.
Okay. So Aeon's End is a pretty heavy cooperative deck builder with a high emphasis on strategic decision making and making sure that all of your decisions are important. It packs a lot of complexity into, um, so when I designed Aeon's End, one of the things that we focused on was how much complexity can I get in the most streamlined, easy to understand package? And I tried to maximize that ratio. So even though it's a pretty complex game, once you get the hang of it, you'll find that everything kind of flows smoothly.
Hello and welcome to Board Game Bonkers. This is under the Meeple Light Show with today's guest, speak up, Jake, is Kevin Riley, who's the designer of Eon's End, which is actually quite a popular game indeed, and certainly in one of the top halves of the Board Game Geeks chart. So welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I started designing board games in 2015, and it all kind of started just experimenting with Dominion. Me and my girlfriend took a copy and we just started changing the rules and what if instead of the phase doing this, you did this, you could take these other actions during this phase. What if it was cooperative? We iterated like that for a while. We started making our own cards, and it just kind of grew on itself. Eventually, I met Nick and Travis Chance from Action Phase Games, and we worked together. We turned the original idea for Anzen was actually a competitive game. It was a 1v1 game, and it was pirates. Yeah, Anzen is a cooperative fantasy post-apocalyptic game. So it went through a lot of changes. Kickstarter went pretty well, and ever since then, kind of been keeping on that track.
Have you got any other projects you're working on that you can share?
So me and Jenny made Kadama Forest. Jenny's my partner. But that came out during the pandemic. It's a social tiling game. It's sort of like Between Two Cities, but with tiling. Right now, so I just wrapped up Anzen 8, Anzen The Descent, and that's going to be on GameFound pretty soon. Maybe by the time this video is out, it'll already be up. And then I'll be starting work on the next year of Anzen content pretty soon. And I'm actually been working on a personal video game in the last year.
What? Can you share what the video game's about?
Yeah, so it's called Mach K9, and you are basically controlling this futuristic metal ball that's being controlled by this race of spacefaring dogs on their dog ship, and you're being attacked by aliens. The gameplay is basically it's a single player physics-based roguelite, and it's kind of inspired by the survivor genre, but instead of bullets and axes and things spewing out of your character, you actually roll the ball into enemies, and it's more like Smash, where if you hit them out of the arena, then that's how you kill the enemies. And it's early in development, it's early alpha, but there's a demo that's available, and I run playtests and iterate on that. It's hard. Making video games is it's really challenged me in a lot of ways that I didn't expect.
Would you say designing a board game's easier or the other way
Yeah,
around?
it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, it's just the added engineering, the fact that things are in motion. Um, my game is in 3D, and if I was gonna do a first game again, and probably whatever game I try and make next, I won't do in 3D. I think it adds a lot of complexity to reasoning about the space, and the quality of the assets you need for them to look good in 3D is higher, and just the whole thing. There's a lot of, so in Aeon's End, I'm like a systems designer. Mechanics, numbers, balance, content, like that's always been my forte, my passion.
Hmm.
And fortunately, you know, Nick and Travis, and now Travis Worthington and Nick and the other people at Indie Boards and Cards are great at the art and marketing and setting up the product and all these other parts that I'm not I'm not very proficient in, and I don't really want to be. Like, I don't want to do that work. But when I'm making my own video game, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if I don't want to, figure out how particle effects work or arrange the level so that it's aesthetically pleasing. Like, there's nobody else to do that, and that's where a lot of the extra challenges come from.
Wow, we'll wait and see how that pans out. So,
Sure.
before I get into explaining how this will work, in case people are wondering why on earth it's a mess behind me, it's because I'm actually video, so it's all disjointed. And I'll probably confuse people depending when this video comes out, because other videos I've already recorded for the future will have a completely different backdrop. So don't let it confuse you, please. I'm just in the middle of changing a few things. So what's this all about? Well, we're going to draw 10 questions from this bowl. Now, I guess there's no idea what the questions are, and certainly I can't even remember for the life of me what they are. But it's split into three different categories. We have a yes or no questions. We have agree or disagree questions, and we have what's the first thing that comes to mind questions, mostly related to the board game industry. So let's dive into our first question. So are we ready, Kevin?
Sure, let's do it.
Well, it could be a statement, not a question. So the first one is agree or disagree. So as a statement, so people who just ask for board games at Christmas, well, I don't know who wrote this, but I'll say it anyway, needs to get a life.
Oh, disagree. What?
Yes.
That's a weird.
I would be in the same pot as you. So what I suppose it's one of those strange things, because most people in the board gaming industry ask for board games at Christmas. That's the big goodies that we get at Christmas time.
Yeah, that's yeah, I mean, it's a thing that I think people that are that judgmental about other people's hobbies need to get a life.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with enjoying board games, just like there's nothing wrong with enjoying skiing or skateboarding or running. If you run a lot and you want running shoes for Christmas, like, that's good. It's good that you know what you like and that you're passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't matter what you get for Christmas. If you're passionate about something, you've got a hobby, and that's what you get for your Christmas present, well, that's as long as you're happy with it, that's what matters.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we don't judge people what they get for Christmas, because we've got different budgets as well. But if that's what makes people happy and they get board games for Christmas, then fantastic. So
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see who wrote that question, because I can't for the life remember. So let's dive into the second one. Let's save this, and
Yeah.
hopefully we get a more amicable question or statement. So our second one,
Yeah,
Kevin,
I'm a little nervous now.
is what phrase comes to mind? So
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think this will lie a good one with you. So when a
Okay.
publisher releases a game twice the size of Gloomhaven,
Uh-huh. What's the
so
first thing that comes to mind?
yeah, I mean, you've got Frosthaven, which is bigger than Gloomhaven, but think about double the size.
It's not balanced. As a game systems designer, the first thing I think of when I see a game the size of Gloomhaven Frosthaven is it's not balanced. And that's okay. It can still be a great game, but you have to go into it with the expectation that, like, sometimes you're going to get a scenario that's just kind of BS. Like, it's not really fair for your party. It's not really fair for, like, the difficulty it says it should be. And whether that's too easy or too hard, you never really know. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's how I think of huge games like that.
I would just think they're bloody crazy. I just
Yeah.
think, what on earth would you want a game twice the size of Gloomhaven? Bonkers.
Well, you only want one game for, I mean, probably several years, depending on how enthusiastic your group is.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Gloomhaven, I mean, that is ridiculously big as it is. Never mind bigger. I mean, when you
Hmm.
put out Frosthaven, it was getting beyond it. I think it gets to the point of ridiculousness now. How much time have you got to be sitting down playing all that content? And I think that's what you have to consider as well. Not only the price point, but also, are you actually going to get through all the scenarios? Is there enough differentiation in terms of the differences between the scenarios, or is it the kind of same gameplay
Yeah,
all through? Because that's what you have to consider with these giant games. Is it worth investing that money and time?
yeah. And I think part of what those games sell is the fantasy that you will. And for some people, it's not a fantasy. I'm sure they do get through enough or most of the game or all of it. But for me and the people I've tried to play Gloomhaven and Frosthaven with, like I'm in a Frosthaven campaign. We do one scenario probably every other week on average. It's like we're never going to finish. This game
Yeah.
has 10 times or 100 times more content than we need. Um, but it's kind of there. It's like always looming. It's like, well, what if you spend a little more time on me? Like, you want to see what comes next? You want to open another box and play a new character? And like the gameplay's pretty fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, it's when you get it. As long as you get enjoyment from it, that's what matters at the end of the day. But I've stayed clear of the big giant games like that because I just haven't got the time to simply invest in it.
Yeah.
And that's okay for some people. Others who enjoy that want to be spending, every single evening playing it. Well, fantastic. Just
Right.
I that with little spoons running about. So let's dive in to our third question. So
Sure.
that was an interesting one. I wonder what other people's viewpoints are on that. Because games do seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's got to be a point of it needs to stop. So let's read out the third one, which is what phrase comes to mind. So when you invite someone to a gaming night and halfway through a game, they order a pizza.
Um, I mean, I'd probably rather they wait until the game ends, but I guess it depends on the game. If we're playing Frosthaven and we're halfway through, like, that we still got a ways to go.
Yeah,
But also I always like put out food when I'm hosting the game night, so like I guess I'd be kind of disappointed that like I put out, crackers and meat and cheese and fruit, and they were like, "Nah, I want a greasy pizza instead."
I've been more worried about if their hands touch those cards.
Yeah, I see. I guess I think of like they ordered the pizza though. Like pizzas, it's not like you order a pizza and it just appears. You're halfway through the game, you ordered the pizza. I expect the pizza to arrive like between games.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine when there's a break, and I'm kind of one of these. I think, I tell my kids, wash your hands before you touch these games.
Right.
I have no idea where your hands have been. And I think that should be the kind of same concept about etiquette when you're gaming with someone. It's a little bit cheeky to be ordering a pizza, and especially if somebody's one put food out, which is it greasy,
Hmm.
and a greasy product in, start eating their game pieces. You're going to consider, how would that make someone feel? Because it's not your game. So how
Right.
would you feel if that was your game and somebody did the same exact same thing? Well, you might not be bothered, but I'm certainly
Yeah.
most people would be. So it's about those kind of etiquettes, isn't it, with food when you're gaming?
Yeah, I found that like, how would you like it if I did this? It for some people it just doesn't really work. They're like, yeah, I don't care the quality of my games. I'll eat food on them and if they're greasy and disgusting, like it doesn't bother me. It's like, okay, well, fine. It bothers me and I need you to respect that. You gotta be a little more explicit sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously if you're gaming with those people, perhaps don't game with them. So let's move into a fourth one.
Sure.
I had a couple of strange ones. So we'll see what comes up
Do you
next.
do you vet these? Does someone else like write them on slips of paper and then give them to you?
So I came up with most of them. Some of them, no, I didn't come up with them. So
Hmm,
we cut up and place them straight in the bowl. Now I have no idea what half
I
of
see.
these are. So I did, yeah, they are vetted, not by me.
Okay.
So it's subjective, but most of them are good. So this one is
Yeah.
an agree or disagree. So
Okay.
there are
Sure.
too many cards in board games.
Hmm. Disagree.
That's an interesting one. Why?
Well, to me, this question reads like passive aggressive, like card games aren't board games. Like board games are Euro games and mini games. And I would say that if if it's a physical game that isn't just a deck of cards, I would probably call it a board game. And even then, if it's a deck of cards, but it's like fancy custom cards, I'd still probably call it a board game. It's just a catch-all genre, and I'm not too pedantic about the fact that the word board is in it, and some of the games don't really have a board.
Yeah, it's a good point. I remember when I first started, when I very, very, very first got into gaming, and there's this concept that if it didn't have a board and it's only got cards, it's a card game, not a board game.
Right.
Concept of I didn't like cards in games. It's like that's not a board game, you've got cards in it. And it wasn't until after a year of playing modern games that I realized that nearly every single board game has cards. And that's
Yeah.
a key component part of the gameplay and the strategic gameplay. So, understanding that cards can complement a board game. Now, when it's only cards, it's still technically, and you're right, it's still technically a board game. Now, the exception is you could argue that the smaller packed games or wallet games are card games because they only contain 12 cards, for example. So you could make that argument a point. But at the end of the day, you
Yeah.
can the pernicketiness of categorizing every single little game. When it gets to the point of ridiculousness, a board game is a board game. It's all under one umbrella. Doesn't matter whether it's got cards, it's got a board, or whatever it's got.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel is like if it's a game you play with people in real life with components, it's probably a board game. And the difference between a board game and a card game just doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Brings back childhood memories of Tiddlywinks when I used to play that when I was a little child. To me, even though it's the most simplistic, ridiculous game ever. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what other people think as well, and whether they would conceive as a card game being a board game, etc., and whether
Sure.
that's there are too many cards in board games. I'm sure some do, but the majority don't. So this next question is a yes or a no answer. So, do you feel artists get enough recognition in the board game industry?
Hmm. Probably not. So I think it's so art is it's a really difficult like to correctly assess the significance of the art. I think of the art as kind of like the dressing on a store, the background, the lights, the sound, that sort of thing where it's like, well, if your favorite game had trash art and looked like something completely different, you probably never would have picked it up in the first place. And on
Yeah,
playing it, you probably wouldn't feel the way that you do about it. So the
absolutely.
art is absolutely essential to the playing experience. But at the same time, the effect that it has on you is so subtle that a lot of people don't even realize that like the reason they like these particular types of games are actually more because of the art, um, or maybe not like more because of the art, but like the art is such an essential part of that experience. If you took if you took Gloomhaven and you themed it My Little Pony, the demographic that wants to play it is completely different. I know that's an extreme example, but if you take Gloomhaven and you make it look like it was drawn by, it's pixel art, the demographic changes a lot. And when we talk about board games, we almost always talk about, oh, I'm going to play the new game by you, Rosenberg, because I really like tiling games. Not, I'm going to play the new game by, I literally don't even know the artist who works on his games, or if it's the same artist, or how that even functions. Like with Aeon's End, we use a studio of artists. And I don't know any of the individuals that work for it. I don't know individuals who worked on specific pieces. It's all just kind of been Gong Studio. And I think that changes for AE8, the way we're doing art, with different sources, but this is one of my privileges as a systems game designer is I've kind of disconnected myself from a lot of the art things and let other people take care of them. So unfortunately, I don't know as much about that. But certainly the way we talk about games, the way we engage with them, I think doesn't give the artists as much credit as they deserve.
Yeah, it's a good point because if you would ask people name 10 game designers or name 10 game designers, ask them
Yeah.
to name 10 artist struggling. So it is a good point, and I think there's more recognition coming into it because when the Dice Hour have done videos to show the top 10 kind of board game, the kind of art and the actual graphic design of it.
Mm,
So there is more recognition coming in, but it's nowhere near to the level as game designers get. But
yeah.
you're right. Art plays a huge importance to how someone feels when they play a game. Now, when I go and buy a game, I don't care how good the game is, if the art is not to my liking, I won't touch it because that will
Hmm.
fit my experience and that will bug me. So I'm all about I need to see the art. The art needs to be appealing, and
Yeah.
then look at right. How does the game actually function? And how does it make me feel?
Hmm.
Am I going to buy that game? So that's important. You're absolutely right. If it's disconnected from the theme, from the art, etc., that can put a lot of people off. Now, there's some people out there that like the mechanisms, and that's the core element of them making the
Yep.
decision to buy a game or not the art. But I
Yep.
would never touch a game if the art to me is ugly, and of course it's all subjective. But that is a big factor, and you're absolutely right in what you say. That's a big important.
Yeah. And I think art is it's a hard thing to talk about if you don't understand art well. And I think a lot of people just don't. Like I don't know how to talk about art. I can look at a piece and I can say I like it, I don't like it. Here's some like vague reasons why, but I can't really point to specifics. I can't really say like, oh, this is the technique I would use to improve it the way I can about game design.
Yeah, well, I can draw stick men, so that's as far as my art design goes.
Right.
So so let's move on to our next question, and number 6.
Sure.
See what comes out. So we have got a yes or a no question. So do crowdfunding previews, so this is previews and channels, lack transparency because they are paid for?
Uh, so if a playthrough channel is paid for and doesn't disclose that they're paid for, then they lack transparency. If they disclose it, then I think it's fine.
Yeah, so think about a pre-Kickstarter game sent to
Yeah.
reviewer to review. So that pre-Kickstarter game, they've then reviewed it. Do we feel that there's enough transparency and the honesty of that review because it's been paid for to carry that review out in a pre-Kickstarter?
This is, I think, a more complicated question of like, it depends on the channel. It depends on how well you know the channel. I'm sure there are some channels that will basically just say good things about whoever gives them money. But I also feel like then they will tend to lose reputability if they start endorsing bad games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ideally, the situation is you find reviewers or people who will play through your game that are biased toward your game to begin with, so they're likely to want to give it a good review, and you also are paying them. But I guess my suggestion would be if you see reviews for something that's trying to immediately get money from you, well, take the reviews with a grain of salt. Like there's clearly a connection. There's a reason that this Kickstarter posted these reviews on the page, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I guess in the context of Kickstarter, I don't think that there's a lack of transparency because the consumer should understand that like there's a connection here. I mean, obviously the person doing the review should say somewhere on their page that this has been paid for or whatever, but when I look at games to back and I see a bunch of reviews, it doesn't mean the same thing as if I organically stumble on those reviews, but it still might mean that this is a cool game and that people like it.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at it. It gives you an idea of how the game might play, and that's the way I see those reviews, not the opinion, because
Yep.
they made them biased because they've been paid for. So I take it, and you're right, take it with a grain pinch of salt because it's about how does the game function and play, and will you enjoy it? That's an important point of those
Right.
previews, not necessarily to sell you to buy it. That's been biased then, isn't it? And not really necessarily honest or balanced in that viewpoint. So that's important to kind of look at and see it that way. But everyone's got a different opinion on that, and I'm sure there's some people who perhaps do give an opinion on both sides, but as you say, that can damage the relationship with the publisher or the
Right.
designer. They're too negative with a review. But I suppose that's about transparency up front of how that review will be undertaken in the first place to avoid that
Yeah.
difficult comment later.
Yeah. I
So,
think if I was a reviewer and somebody approached me to review their game and I previewed it, I took a little look and I was like, I can't honestly give a good review of this game, like then I would just not take the deal instead of possibly
yeah.
damaging my reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just being honest up front. Absolutely. Very key for reviewers to be doing that. So
Yeah.
let's move to our next question. We're on to number 7. Let's see what comes out the pot. Getting better, and this is an agree or disagree statement. So significantly more board games will use apps in the near future.
Yeah, agreed. Software is becoming easier to write. There's more tools in place. There's more engineers. There's more education in the space. And there's a lot of cool things that we can do with it's sort of like augmented reality. Sometimes the app takes the form of like a dungeon master or like a neutral third party who can hold it hidden information. I played the Search for the Lost Species recently, which is an amazing leverage of an app. It's a like a hexagonal? Yeah, I think it's hexagonal grid where you're trying to find a deduction game where you're trying to find where different animals are. And every time you play, the board is generated randomly. There's an infinite number of spaces where, or sorry, not the board, but like where the animals are and the clues that are associated with them. So there's a lot of replayability. And that's all done because it has an app companion and you can say like, give me information about this, and you don't need to look anything up. You don't need like a book. You can guess something. And when you get yes or no, where you right or wrong, when you're wrong, you don't also just learn the information in the way that, without an app, you'd have to do it. So yes, we'll be seeing more of that, and I'm excited to see what people can do with it.
I'm I'm someone who's on the opposite side where I hope it does. I'm quite old school, so I hope it doesn't happen because
Mm,
I like physically touching the game. I like everything to be driven by the rule book and gross myself in that experience because I want to get away from technology. Now that's my opinion.
yeah,
Uh, Now, I'm not saying apps are bad. There's some apps that benefit games, particularly in the management of certain, systems where it might be convoluted and trying to work out, like you say, the board setups or the cards or the kind of hidden information, etc. They can assist you in that experience, which is fine. I'm just not a fan of it. I don't have any games that use an app for that
hmm
reason. Stay away from technology. Now, other people will be different. They're quite happy to use apps, and that's great. My other theory is, which is a caveat argument here, is you can say that, well, that doesn't last forever, so that will be gone.
yep,
So you've got the argument say, well, you play the game there and now, you're not playing it in 20 years' time. So
yep,
there's a caveat to that. But everyone has their opinion, and I'm sure there'll be fantastic things. And actually, I don't know if the video's up, but we've got a video coming up to look at the future. It might be up actually by the time this video goes out. The future of board games, and it is up actually, looking at the types of technology and what's coming out in the board game industry in the future and what board games
mm,
may like in the future. It's quite an interesting video because it looks into the different holographic types of board games that might come out in the future. There's all sorts of exciting things that may potentially come into the industry. We will see, as they say, when technology grows, it will be exciting to see actually how it develops and what else will be coming in besides
right,
just apps. So hopefully we'll see some innovations come that'll give a different spin on how a board game functions and plays.
yep, yeah.
The
I see those viewpoints and I respect them. We have too much technology in our lives sometimes, and it's good to have something where you're actually fully disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's got to be a balance. Otherwise, you consume yourself too much in technology. But somebody may be the complete opposite. And my partner's a computer scientist, and it's nice to get away from the technology and just do
hmm
something not involved in technology, but everyone's completely different, and it's fine if somebody was engrossed himself in an app all day playing a board game. Crack on.
Yeah.
Move in to our next question.
Hmm.
And we have got, it's a big one, this. This is an agree or disagree.
Okay.
Games like Everdell with the tree and Camelot with the pyramid have unnecessary gimmicky parts.
Yeah, disagree. I think this
Okay.
goes back to the art and the feel of the game.
Yeah.
Um, I respect that there are people who see that and they're like, this game could be, $3 or $5 cheaper if it didn't have that, and there'd be less setup, and it's just annoying and it's in my way. And there are other people who take that out and like the reason they want to play that game is because the tree or the whatever thing like makes them feel just special enough about the experience that they're like, yeah, this is the worker placement game that I really like because I like how that whole environment makes me feel. It just goes along with the art, the presentation of everything of like a game is selling an experience and a fantasy, and those components for some people are a really essential part of that.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point. I've played a game called Yggdrasil, and that is the only kind of 3D structure that actually that I've played has an actual function because you have to rotate the tree.
Mhm.
So you have to use it, and you're actually going up the tree in different levels, and that's a core part of the gameplay is how the tree functions.
Right.
And it was a great experience because it was unique. It was completely different than anything else I ever played, and it was like, oh, this is great. It's like the tree of life I've got, and I was talking how it functioned. Obviously, it wasn't a tree of life because there was lots of monsters coming out to kill you.
Sure.
But there is an argument to say that you're absolutely right. That is there a need to have the tree in Everdale? And you're absolutely right. Well, if it gives you a good feeling and aesthetically it's pleasing, well, does it matter if it's there? If somebody is enjoying it because of that tree. And I remember showing Everdale Far Shore to Kim, and I was like, yeah, is there any need for that tree? And she went, yeah, but I like it. So it's like, so people have got different opinions on it, and I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's be have a more fulfilling experience with those kind of little gimmicky parts and those structures. Now, yes, some of them are not necessary, but if they give you enjoyment and fun, then so be it. That's what
Yeah.
matters. That's
Yeah.
important matters. But I'll be interested to see what other people think about, especially about Everdell, whether that although tree technically isn't needed, but it does.
Right.
It just brings a more fun experience, an engrossing experience with a theme.
Yeah. Yeah.
In. So, for me, that is, in a way, increases the fun and the enjoyment of playing the game with that tree structure there because it engrosses you more in the theme. That's the way I see it. But I'm
Right.
interested in what people think as well. So let's move in to our next one. And I think we're on 9. So number 9 is an agree or disagree. So Game Found will be just as successful as Kickstarter for selling board games within the next 5 years.
Uh,
It's a toughie.
I don't know enough about these two platforms to have an informed opinion.
Do you think I'll come into this because I think although Game Found does things that are slightly better than Kickstarter and vice versa,
Hmm.
so Kickstarter is so big, it's like the Amazon of crowdfunding.
Yeah.
So big, I don't think Game Found will reach that level. I think it'll be strong, and I think it'll be a good platform to be selling board games, but I don't think it will overtake, certainly not in 5 years, Kickstarter. I think we're going to be looking at decades before Game Found actually reaches anywhere near to the status of Kickstarter when it comes to selling board games.
Mm.
But we
That
will,
seems like a reasonable opinion.
we will see. I'm sure Alex has got different opinions. So was on our show because obviously he's part of the Game Found. I think they've done a great job
Oh, sure.
get to where they're at. I think they do things really well. But will it be as big? I just can't see it. I really can't. When something's that big like Kickstarter, to get to the level they're at is almost an impossible task. But look, if they want to take that task on, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Great, the
Com
industry. Absolutely.
Competition's always good for,
Yeah.
I mean, everything really. It forces everyone to be better. So I hope they do well.
Yeah, so do I. And they are doing well. They're on the right track. So I hope they continue to progress. Absolutely. So let's move into a final one.
Sure.
And we have got a small one. So this one is yes or no. So is the board game industry overwhelming for new gamers?
Yeah, agreed. And a big part of this problem is that many people who are deep in the board game hobby do not understand how to introduce new people to the hobby. There's so common things that I see are like, I enjoy this game, therefore you will enjoy this game, which is not at all how
Yeah.
hobby like a hobby and a new player interact. That doesn't make any sense. Um, Another part we keep talking about art today is they will discount how important art is and aesthetics for getting someone new into a game. If you've barely ever played board games, you don't really know mechanics, you've never played a deck builder, you've never played a worker placement, maybe the most complicated game you've played is Star Realms, then mechanics are probably not going to be the thing that get you to choose one game over another because they're all basically just unknowns. Like, what is a worker placement? Will I enjoy that? I don't know. But I really like how pretty Azul is. So maybe we should play Azul, right? And I think people can do a much better job of here's three-ish games, you know, 2 to 5 that are in the right weight class and have an aesthetic that matches the audience. And if that still feels like too much choice, just pick one. Just say, I think this is a good fit for you. Here's why. It doesn't take too long to learn. Let's get into it. Because another big part of it is the analysis paralysis, the well-known fact that if you give someone more choices, it actually becomes harder to make a decision. So
Yeah.
you invite someone new over and you say, I'm a hobby. I have 50 games on my shelf. We can play anything. And they look at it and they go, I don't, how could they possibly choose one of those games to play? So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's a good point. You generally want to give people 2 or 3 choices. These games would probably be suitable to start with. Which one do you want to play? And you're right, they're going to look at how good it looks first. Well, I like the look at this. Let's try that.
Mm-hmm.
Same with a child. If you give a child an option, you're going to look at what looks good, not how it's going to function. They're going to look, oh, I like the look of that. Can we play that? So if I get my son to look at the board game collection, look at what looks nice and pretty, and usually it's a big, grandiose, huge games that are far too complicated. So
Right.
maybe we can try these ones up here in this corner.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's how does it aesthetically pleasingly look, and what's going to kind of drag that person into picking that game rather than it's got all these different mechanisms, and this is how this functions because that means that's alien to the
Yep.
person.
Yep.
Nothing. And you're right. You start off with the most simplest, basic games. You find out what they've played. If they only play card games, we'll stick with a card game because that's what they're used to. If
Yep.
they play play, well, maybe transition to something like Catan or something, so like that next step up. So something that isn't too heavy, but still has some kind of meaning and understanding about selling and
Right.
trading. So yeah, it's trying to find that connection and then introduce them to something that's basic and give them 2 or 3 options. These are 2 or 3 games you might enjoy. Which one looks pleasing to you? So it'd be interesting to see what our viewers think. So I'd like to thank and for joining us. And this has been an interesting one because a couple of these questions were a little bit bizarre, but we got the end, and it'd be interesting to see. And it's really fascinating as well that people got different viewpoints on certain different aspects, particularly when it comes to technology as well and board gaming.
Sure.
A board game has too many cards or not, and it'd be interesting to see what you feel as well at home. So let me know in the comments down below, because we want you to get involved. I'd like to thank our guests for coming on, and we will be bringing in more guests onto the show, and this is our final season. Now, before we head off, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so. Give the video a like as well. It's completely free to do so. Yes, you know that like button that's down there, probably on your left, or it might be on your right. Please just hit it. And that brings us to the end. So thank you once more for watching, and until next time, take care.
Thanks.